Welcome to the Monos Pod with Tino and Matt. What's up, Matt?
Going well. Going well. Congratulations.
Right
Donning the
here,
hat.
baby. Right here. Go blue. Last night was the national championship game against UW. Michigan obviously came out on top. I'm a Michigan alum, but I grew up in South Seattle, and mom and stepdad went to UW, and a bunch of people I grew up with played football there. So while I should have been conflicted, I wasn't. I was 100% Michigan. Yeah, it was fun. And I'm not hungover today, which is unlike the first national championship I experienced in 97, 98, where I don't really remember most of that trip to Pasadena. In any case, today on the Monos Pod, we are going to talk about first base, dynasty, minor league prospects. We will give our top 10. We'll kind of dive deep into each player, talk about what we like and don't like, kind of like what we did with catchers. Matt, what's your first thought when you think about this first base crop?
Um, it's it's kind of May.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's nobody that there's one person that I have that one player that stands out, but with first base, I think you need this is your corner spot. You need somebody that's gonna compete against the top first baseman. You I think it really hurts you if you get a Mark Grace type of first baseman, right? That's good defensively, good batting average, but isn't going to give you a lot of stats, whether they're ratios or counting stats.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Nolan Samuel.
what's that?
Nolan Samuel.
Yeah, I would even put Manzardo there as well.
Sure.
Um, and the other thing is looking at the dynasty overall first base ranks. I don't think there's really anybody that could get in the top five right now as far as prospects go, right? So even with catcher, we said, well, catcher's weak, but there's still people because of the lack of competition in the position. There's people
Right.
that could get into the top five. So even if you have a player break out, they're really not gonna. You have Olson, Vlad, Harper, Freeman, Alonso, Casas, Torkelson, Bellinger, and I put Vinny in kind of there. And I think it starts to drop at number 10 with Naylor
Right.
into a whole different tier. So really, if somebody breaks out, they're going to be the 10th ranked first baseman, right? So it's not going to really put you over the top in competing with these other guys.
I would. So we should also qualify. Who do we list as first baseman and why? The way I go about it is I've got the guys already, obviously, that are listed at first base that we expect to stay there. But I also listed a couple who have who are seen on lists at other positions who I expect to land at first.
Mm.
Whether it's team context or mostly it's skill set and what I see from them in the field and body type, right? So I'll say off the top, I definitely have Lazaro Montes at first base. I think that's where he lands ultimately. I think he's just too big of a dude to stay in the corner outfield. I have Kobe Mayo as a first baseman. A lot of it is, he's 6'5", 230, and Scott Rowland is probably the only third baseman that played a great third base at that size. So I think Mayo ends up at first, also with Gunnar and Jackson Holiday. I can't
Mm.
see them. And then lots of second base types, Connor Norby. Um, I don't see Baltimore playing Mayo at third. I'd see Mayo as their first baseman. Who else on this list? Let's see. I have Tyler Locklear. You see him listed at third sometimes. He's not playing third for the Mariners. Defensively, he's not good enough. Ryan Clifford, you see some outfield listing. I think he's a first baseman ultimately. Um, and then Bryce
And I
Elder.
think we covered Samuel Basallo
We
last week.
did. We did. And then Bryce Eldridge as well, the first round pick of the Giants. He might pitch, he might play a corner outfield because of his arm, but I think ultimately he's the first baseman. So just to qualify, I have those guys as first baseman um, because of both context and body type. I just think Montes and Mayo specifically are way too big to play anywhere but first. Do you have them on your first base list as well,
I have Mayo.
but not
I
Montes?
I didn't put in Montes yet. No, but I could see him going there, and he would be fairly high on my list.
I was gonna say, where would you slot him if
I would slot him. I'd be tempted to slot him number two.
okay.
I have Mayo as number one.
Okay. Why don't we get
By
started
far.
then? Let's get
Yeah.
started with it. So what is it about Kobe Mayo that has
So
that
I have Mayo
you
as one, in his own tier as well.
okay.
6'5", as you said, 230, fourth round first base or third baseman, but ultimately coming here, fourth round out of high school, right? So he's still quite young. I'm surprised by that compared to some of the other older ones like Mervis or so forth. Um, I do like this as well. I'm getting more and more annoyed at the platoon.
Mhm.
I like the sense that he's a righty. And to me that's a lot of games. I know first basemen don't tend to platoon, but when you get kind of beyond the top 10, that's going to be something that you're going to face.
Mhm.
I have his hit at 55. A lot of people have at 50. I think his hit has greatly improved. His power at 70. His walk rate has always been good. It's at 15%, which is solid and above average and would play well in the majors. His K rate has gone down. It used to be high 20s. It's now at 24%. I like his on base percentage over 400. His slug well over 500. Always a good sign there. His hard hit rate 35. I think that's tops among the people on my list. 113 max EV, 90 percentile EV 108, and average EV just about 92. That's all high percentile in MLB. He did get a little lucky. Your favorite stat here with BABIP. He did have a 384. I think that was in Double
All
A.
day, yeah.
Yeah, and then 315 as well. He's solid across the board as far as launch. So he's 40 fly ball rate, 35 line drive, 35 ground ball, which is nice. He does have a lot of pull power. He's over 50 in pull power, pull side power. His WRC plus is elite, 127, 178. And then scouting wise, I like his swing. It's so damn simple. And it's going to play well in the majors. So again, Baltimore, they just keep hitting jackpots. I'm not sure if they're going to make a trade before the season starts, but they're just overloaded all over the place. You even have Kierstad, who's may even compete at first base there from the other side. So even if they move Mayo over there. So what are they going to do and who are they going to move? I don't think they'll move Mayo because he's just too damn good to move. I would move the Norbys or Westberg types or their shortstop. What is it? The defensive one.
Ortiz.
Ortiz, yeah, Joey Ortiz, yeah.
I
So
also think Basayo has such great value right now
yeah.
that you could probably get. Obviously, they're looking for pitching, and Basayo could bring back a haul from a pitching standpoint. I have a lot of the same feelings about Mayo. I have his tools slightly lower. I have a 50 hit and a 65 power with Mayo. I do think he has 30 home run power. I do think he reaches that in the majors. I see him as your 250, 350, I don't know, 500 sort of power hitter from the right side. I think he sticks at first base. I think you see he and Basayo and Rutschman at some point kind of, take that bat to first base, DH, and catcher, with Basayo potentially toggling if he can stay at catcher. I like Mayo a lot. I think, like you said, they've got a logjam that they need to figure out. But I think Mayo is one of those that they'll keep. What's interesting to me too is they have so many prospects that are good at a lot of things, right? So Gunner's well-rounded. Jackson Holliday's well-rounded. Colton Cowser's well-rounded, Norby's well-rounded. Westberg is too. Mayo is the one who's just like all power, right? And I think because he has that sort of, and I guess Kierstad hitting power too, but I think they keep him in part because he's different, right? And he supplies something very different that the other prospects don't. I have him number 2. I worry quite a bit about the left field fences in Baltimore for a right-handed power hitter. I could see him being a true 30 home run hitter and end up with 23, right? And if he's a 240 hitter with 23 home runs, as opposed to a 255, 260 hitter with 30, that's a huge difference, right? You go from serviceable first base fantasy player to not really wanting him to start. And that could simply be because of that left field fence. The other thing is, and this is really simplistic, but a right-handed power hitter like Mayo, I always worry about what I want to see when he comes up is how does he handle a slider, right? Because he can hit fastballs. If you watch his tape, you see him turn on fastballs all the time. But how does he hit the slider out of a right-handed pitcher? But he's number 2 for me. I think, again, proximity plays. I wouldn't surprise me to see him break camp with the team. I think it's more realistic. You see him kind of mid-season, but proximity matters. And I think, he, along with Manzardo and Shanuel, are either going to start the year in the majors or going to play in the majors second half. Really like him as a prospect. I'm not going to chase him in dynasty leagues necessarily, but if I can get him at a decent price, Kobe Mayo is a dude for sure. My number 1, so he was your 1. My 1 is Lazaro Montes. He is listed, so 19 years old, left-handed, Cuban, signed by the Mariners in 2022. For those who haven't seen him, go YouTube him or whatever. Like, he hits absolute just tanks, like beyond tanks. The dude. So the dangerous comp everybody throws around is Yordan Alvarez. I think that's not fair to Montes to say that. He's listed at 6'3", 210. Most people have said he's 6'5", 6'6", like 230, 240 right now. His body looks, I won't say sloppy, but it definitely doesn't look completely toned and in shape as of right now. But that team, that Modesto single A team for the Mariners was so fun with Ty Pete and Colt Emerson and Cole Young. And it was a really exciting team to watch. And Montes was the slugger on that team, right? So at that time, he was 18 years old. And you're talking about a 19-year-old now with that kind of size and some back control who hits absolute tanks. In rookie and A-ball this season, 241 at-bats. He had 13 home runs. He had 54 walks, 76 strikeouts, but his triple slash was 303, 440, 560. So that's a 1,000 OPS. I think he's too thick to stay in the outfield, right? He's just really, the way we would say it back in the day in the hood is he's big boned, right? He's a big dude. His frame is huge. But Montes for me is obviously it's a 19-year-old in single A. And so it's really hard to put that guy at the top of your list. But I've been aggressive these last couple of years. If I see the talent there, I'm not going to be afraid to rank them where I think they should be ranked talent-wise. And I think Montes has that kind of power without the hit tool questions that you typically see associated with what I see as a 70 power. The one knock on his swing currently is he does swing over breaking balls quite a bit. And so he tends to hit a lot of breaking balls into the ground, which obviously isn't great. But his ability to elevate fastballs is ridiculous. And I think Montes does have the upside of an Alvarez type, right? He does have 40, 45 home run type of power. And as long as his development continues on this particular curve, I think the sky's the limit for him. I disagree with you in that I think because I include Montes in the first baseman, I think he is a potential superstar. He is the only one I can say that about in my top 10. But I absolutely am all over him as a prospect. I was at the beginning of last year as well. We had people laugh at us and laugh at me for including him in some of my top 100s. But the reality is you've got to identify these guys early, right? And if we're saying that high draft picks in, you know, the Rule 4 draft are top 100 out of high school, why aren't we saying, you know, the 18-year-old in the international free agent or international signing is in a top 100 prospect as well? I think there's some prejudice there as far as ranking those guys. So Montes for me, he's my number one, clear cut. Sky's the limit for him.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ranked Montes as a first baseman, where would you slot him?
I would slot him in that same. So Mayo's alone right now. I slot him in that same tier.
Mm-hmm.
Mayo I put just because of proximity, but I want to see more of Montes. But you know, I love the walk rate. That's almost what, near 20. The K rate's gone down just a tad. You know, and you got to consider again the age, right? So A-ball, you know, he's 3 years younger than pitchers there, right?
Right.
Even in A-ball. So but yeah, this type of maturity, especially with the walks, is something to get excited about. I see the Mariners switching up too as far as the way they're going to train their hitters, right? It's instead of bottom up, it's kind of top down now, bringing over the philosophy from Miami last year. I think you're going to have a nice combination of wanting more contact, but also sticking to the quality contact, the hard hit rates. So I like to see what they do with their youth with this, because I think even with, we were just talking about Soler, even if you saw the effect of what Miami brought in last year and how that affected somebody that's big and powerful like Soler, he had some of his best metrics last year. By being a tad more patient and looking for better contact. So yeah, I think that's great. The other thing you mentioned, as far as YouTube goes, there's a YouTube video comparing Montez's swing to Alvarez side by side, which is really cool.
He's the type of hitter that, and this is why I think he gets to his game power really easily, is he's got the kind of swing where he can put out an 85% swing and hit the ball 400 plus feet, right? He's got that kind of strength. And so if the hit tool continues to improve, obviously he's got a good eye with his walk rate, right? And he's able to identify pitches. If you can get him to understand how to hit a breaking ball and swing 85%, he can still hit those out. He's got that kind of power. And so it's not a, 100% swing every time in order to hit the home run sort of dude. It's, you've seen hitters like Yordan Alvarez hit home runs with swings that you don't expect to go out. And it's because they're so strong. And that's, you put, Montes is that type of athlete, right? Judge, like I said, Alvarez, those big, muscly sluggers, that's who he is. So yeah, I don't know. I'm super pumped about him. I'm on the fence so much as far as whether to keep him or not in our hybrid keeper, just because its proximity is pretty crazy. But it's not unrealistic to think he's up in 26 if he really does kill it this season. So we'll see. So I guess your number 2 is next, huh?
Yeah, my number 2 is Kyle Manzardo. And this again is entering a new tier. This tier could go all the way to 2 through 9 for me. Of very different hitters, but they're just not. I don't think they're going to be higher than at the end of a top 10 or even reach the top 10 overall dynasty. So, but anyway, Manzardo. 60205, second round draft pick, 2021, out of Washington State. He's a lefty. I some downgraded his hit because he did struggle a little bit more this year to 60. I still think he's 60, 65. His power is 50, 55. And that's one thing he tried to increase this year. I think his EVs have gone up as he's done so. There were some really cool measurables at the AFL where he was just hitting the crap out of the ball with the max EV and the average EV and even the 90 percentile. So that's kind of been the knock on him. Last year, when he did have better counting stats and ratios, his EVs were below average. So that was a critique of him last year. He struggled in Tampa Bay. Once he went over to Cleveland, he did a lot better. Tampa Bay was kind of weird this year because it was just kind of this trend in AAA with their hitters. They all struggled at the start, even like Meade, Manzardo, and then towards the end, after Manzardo left, they all just cranked it. But anyway, he was struggling with everybody else there. I am cautious about Tampa trading somebody.
Right.
Yeah. Do they know something we don't? His on base percentage was a little lower. His walk rate was 13%. His on base percentage was 332. His BABIP, I think, was 250. So I think he had his luck was a little down this year. And his hard hit rate is at 32, which is good improvement from last time. And he got into, let's see, he was getting more into pole side power, which people were asking him to do, which was a positive sign. But I see somebody that can hit 290. I don't see anything higher than 20 home runs, 25 maybe his max at some point. He is that doable first baseman that isn't going to kill you, but I don't see him reaching the elite level. I could see him like in that Naylor position at the end of the top 10.
Mm-hmm. So he was traded from Tampa to Cleveland for Aaron Savali towards the deadline last season. That's how he ended up in Cleveland. I agree. He's my number 4. I think agree pretty much with what you said. I have his hit at 60 and his power at 55. His numbers really did go down last season because he did try to elevate, as you said. He tried to elevate and pull. A lot of times when teams try to get players to change their approach in that way and come off of what they've always done, I don't like it, right? I understand that there's been a lot of success stories, but to me, Manzardo is, a potential 290, 300 hitter. Let him be, right? Let him be who he is. And I do think Cleveland is going to do that because Cleveland teaches contact and not necessarily a big power swing. And I think that's good for Manzardo in that I think we may see him go back to that more line drive sort of swing and trying to just be a good hitter. And I think he'll contribute to Cleveland this season. He might be their starting, DH first baseman type, and he and Naylor both in the lineup. There's not a whole lot for me to dislike about him. I just think his ceiling is pretty low, right? If you're slotting in a 290, I don't know, 85 runs, 20 homers, 80, 85 RBI sort of season with a, close to 800 or right around 800 OPS, what does that get you in fantasy? Is that a first baseman that's going to help you win a championship? And my answer would be no. He plays a role on a team. He might be a good util guy, right? Where you're getting some decent stats out of util, but he's not giving you speed and he's not giving you tremendous power. So I think Manzardo's interesting, but this is the point in if we're talking fantasy, this is the point in the first base ranks where I start to say, these guys are pretty fungible, and I might take a chance on someone who's has a 20% chance of giving me 30 home runs over someone like Manzardo. That's just me. Is So you were really high on him last year at this time. Is there what changed about Manzardo from last year to this year? What that puts him at what is it, three, two or three for you?
You. Um, I think it was more just a change in my philosophy as far
Mhm.
as with fantasy. I think he's a great real life player. I'd love to have him on my team. Um, but in fantasy, you need, especially with prospects, you need those who are going to be elite. And if you're going to invest in them and stick to them, you need to be able to see that pedigree where they can get in the top five. I still think I still think Torque will be a top five first baseman. Maybe his hit isn't there, but he could be. You're shaking your head.
I love
Um,
him. I love him.
yeah, I think his power, he could go and he, despite where he's at in Detroit, I still think he could hit 40 home runs.
I agree.
And he has that pedigree, right? That Manzardo doesn't. And 40 home runs versus 20 home runs at first base is just that's going to put you above most other teams if there's only, you know, 8 or 9 first basemen who are like that, right? So
It's I think
so
his
yeah.
statistical comp is Ty France, right? Obviously, different hitters, right side, left side, on and on. But I think that's the statistical comp. If you like Ty France's production, and Ty France's 290, in a good year, 290 with somewhere between 17 and 22 home runs, and is going to hit fifth or sixth, sometimes maybe third, but you're looking at 85, 90 RBIs in a good year, maybe 80 runs. It's very clearly to me very similar players, right? And I'm
Mm.
assuming Manzardo goes back to what he has always done a little bit more with Cleveland when I say that, but that's the comp. And so if you like Ty France as your first baseman, you'll like Kyle Manzardo, and you'll also
Mhm.
like finishing fourth. You know what I mean? That's kind of what it
Exactly.
comes down to. Who's your number three?
My number three, this is my one of my favorite Mariners prospects. So I have Tyler Locklear.
Ooh, at three, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
But the only hesitation I have here is like Manzardo and Locklear are around the same age, and Locklear hasn't gone to AAA yet, right? So you could say he's kind of at the AA age, right? And so unlike Amontes, who's 3 years younger, he's somebody that is at level competition here. But I so he was second round pick by the Mariners in 2022 out of Virginia Commonwealth. I have him at 50 hits. I have him at 65 power, and I think Baseball America agrees with me there. I think his power is underrated. He makes good contact, which I like. Somebody who hits the ball hard and makes good contact. I think he was at 20% strikeout rate, which is great at that point, 12% walk rate, a near 400 on base percentage, a near 500 um, slug. So he's 900 OPS. I think that slug can advance as well. But you wonder, you know, he's not the type that's going to hit it 450, and you wonder how that's going to play in Seattle. But again, he's not a lefty that's gonna the balls aren't gonna die out in right field, right? So he can get into pull side power at T-Mobile. His max EV is close to 110, 105, 90%, 92% average EV. He was hitting the ball really hard in the AFL. There's some great video there that I like. He does have kind of that compactness to his swing, which I like. And let's see, his launch is over 10. It's 11, at least in the minimum of bats at AFL was measured above 10. So he does have that. You know, he's not going to have that extra loft, but he does have that hard hit line drive swing. So again, he's kind of, for me, kind of like the less hit than Manzardo, more power than Manzardo. Maybe not be that top 10 guy, but he's going to be a solid first baseman for Seattle. And again, like Manzardo, he may be that type that I wouldn't keep, but if I needed a first base filler in a draft in a dynasty league, or if he was available, I would grab him.
Mm-hmm. I like the fact that there is power upside there, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
I have him 6, but part of why I have him number 6 is so first of all, I don't think he's a third baseman.
Yeah.
He's listed first, third. I think he ends up at first. Um, I also I have him 6 behind a couple of guys, mostly because of proximity. One of which has already been in the majors. Do I think he's a better hitter than Shanuel? Probably, but Shanuel has a job and Locklear doesn't as of right now. Locklear is also very much insurance in case Ty France bombs out again. I think the Mariners will give Ty France a couple of months to prove himself this season, provided some sort of move in the offseason. And then if he doesn't, Locklear is going to step in. And I think he's ready, right? He's 23 years old. It's interesting. The comp that Dan O'Dowd, who I don't love, on MLB Network had when they drafted him was Pete Alonso. I don't think he has that kind of light tower power, but he has a ton of thunder in that short swing, like you talked about. But he's an exciting prospect for the Mariners. I think his hit tool is a little better than people give him credit for. I could see him utilizing the park a little bit more and trying to hit the ball in the gaps at T-Mobile, knowing that it's really difficult to hit a home run out for a right-handed hitter. But I do think there's high 20s home run potential in his bat. And I think his hit tool is good enough that he's not going to be 230. He's going to be closer to 250, 260. So exciting young player on a team that really wants and needs controllable bats. I very much think he is a part of the Mariners' future. And I think he takes over first base for Ty France either later this year or the beginning of 25, barring a huge Ty France bounce back this season.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And that they sent him to AFL is an indication they want to move him quickly now.
Right. Think, statistically, think like Brandon Drury, right? Drury had 26 home runs. He hit 262, 306, 497. So around 800 OPS, mid-20s home runs. I think that's a pretty high or top outcome for Locklear, but I think he has that in his bat. I think it'd be really fun for the Mariners if they could get that from him. Who's next for you?
Well, why don't you go ahead? Because I think you have some in there that around
So I went Montes 1, Mayo 2. I had Manzardo 4 and Locklear 6. So my 3 is Xavier Isaac, first baseman for in the Tampa Bay Rays organization. He was picked towards the bottom of the first round in 22, 29th overall. He looks like Peter Griffin to me. I'll just come out and say it. But he's basically a bat only player, right? That's the knock against Tampa when he was drafted is he might be able to play first base. He's probably a DH. He's listed at 6'3", 240. He might be heavier than that. Drafted out of high school in North Carolina. But the dude can hit. If you go and you watch him, clips of him, he's big, he's powerful. I don't like always gravitating towards same race comps, but I think Sam Horn, when I see him for whatever reason, for those that grew up in the 80s, you'll remember Sam Horn, the Boston Red Sox prospect. But 6'3", 240. I have his hit tool at 50, his power at 65. He in high A for Tampa Bay last year. As a 19-year-old, he hit 285, 395, 521 with a 916 OPS, 19 homers and 361 at-bats, 64 walks, 92 strikeouts. He had 12 steals, not sure where those came from, but he's a slugger, right? Through and through. You can tell, though, with that average, he's not lacking a hit tool. I don't, it's probably going to end up at a 50, but it's not a 40, right? It's not the Texas slugger who we'll talk about later, Abimelech Ortiz. That's not who Xavier Isaac is. He's a better hitter than that. The reason, so it sounds a lot like Montes, right? When I describe him, the reason why Montes is above Isaac for me is Montes, I think, has more raw, right? His raw power is even greater than Isaac, and he's a lot more athletic. Montes, before he started to mature, played center field, and now he's playing in a corner, and I think he ends up at first. But he has more. He's got more, a little more twitch and a little more fluidity than Isaac does, and I think that plays out with things like swing adjustments. And I trust his athleticism more. So I love Isaac as a prospect. I'm happy for him that he's right now, he's proving a lot of the doubters wrong, because I think a lot of people had a third, fourth round grade on him when the Rays took him in the first round. But he's a slugger. And if you watch his swing and you believe in it, I think he's worth a flyer in Dynasty to roster right now. Because he is, you compare him to Manzardo, right? If we're going to use that as a comparison or a floor, he's never going to be Manzardo. He's either going to be 35 home runs or, a bit player, I think. But if I
and it's telling that Tampa traded Manzardo and
absolutely and kept Isaac.
Yeah.
It's very telling. Where do you have Isaac?
I have him as 4.
Uh-huh.
I like him a lot. I think he kind of gets when you hear analysis of him, they talk about his swing strike rate and so forth, but the guy's 19, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give him a break. He's walk rate's high too. He's 15% walk rate. On base percentage right around 400, slug over 500. His hard hit is decent. It's not, doesn't hugely stand out, but it's really good. I like him a lot. You do have the Tampa Bay problem. What is Tampa going to do? That's always the big question with their prospects. Him being lefty, I would like to see kind of his splits develop and get more of a sample size as far as how he plays out against lefties. But yeah, and I like these. This is now the second one next to Mayo that has been drafted out of high school, right? The second first baseman. So yeah, it'd be interesting. I think he is maybe Montes on this list, Mayo and Isaac. Those 3 are, I would see, as keepers in a even in our hybrid league. These 3 are worth keeping for me. Yeah. So
Isaac is, so for one, if you look at him, he's like thick with 3 C's type of thick, right? He's a big hips, big midsection, like just a big dude. I also think because he was drafted and the so-called experts kind of pan the pick, right? Why are you picking the first base DH type?
Out of high school.
Out of high school. I think people are looking for reasons to poke holes in him as opposed to looking at what he does well. And I think that will probably continue throughout the minor leagues, where you're going to hear about the things he can't do as opposed to the things that he can do. And in my mind, first base is simply about the bat, right? And I think I'm trying to look at him in a more positive light. And I see a 916 OPS last season for a 19-year-old in A-ball, in high A-ball. So that to me is huge. I like Isaac a lot. Like I said, he's right up there with Montes and Mayo for me. I think those 3 are in a tier by themselves. I like all 3 a ton. I just happen to prefer Montes. So Isaac was 4 or 3 for me. Manzardo was 4, much because, or a lot of it because of proximity. Who is where did we leave off? Number 5 for you?
Yeah. So I like to sort of within this tier couple players together. So like Manzardo and Locklear were my floors, right? Isaac is higher ceiling than those 2. And you just mentioned this guy, maybe he's coming later in your list, but Abimelech Ortiz I have at 5,
Mhm.
largely because of the power. He's 6'0", 230. He's a non-drafted free agent out of Florida Southwestern JC. He's from Puerto Rico. Um, and Texas lately, maybe not with pitching, but with hitters have been able to find some gems. I think Carter being the other one where everyone kind of laughed to where he came from, right? So their scouting is pretty thorough at these lower levels. He broke out last year. He didn't have a standout first year. His EVs kind of like this is like comparable to a pitcher who's gone up in velo. His EVs have gone up 5 in each of the categories from 90 percentile, max EV and average EV. Going to his lefty batter, his hit is maybe 45. His BABIP was quite high this year. He was close to 300. His BABIP was quite high for somebody that big. That's not gonna. It's not because of his speed. He does hit the ball really hard this year, so that could contribute a bit to the high BABIP, but some of it is just it was falling for him this year.
Mhm.
His K rate is I think next to Soderstrom and Clifford on my list is the highest at 27. He does have a decent walk rate, 11%. On base percentage, 377. He does have the highest slug last year of any first baseman I have on the list at 628. I think his ISO was something crazy, right? It was over 300 at some point.
I don't look
Um,
at that, so but go ahead.
um, and let's see. I think he has all fields power. You know, doesn't necessarily have pull side power that's over 50%. Um, to me, he's this dice roll type of player, right? Might as well. He could give you 30 home runs at first base. Roll the dice, right? I don't think he's a standout elite prospect, obviously, but he's worth that dice roll for me in these mid, tier first baseman in the top
Mhm.
10.
I agree. I agree with everything you said. He hit 294 last year. I think you're looking at a 240 hitter, especially
Mhm.
as big as he is. He's slow, right? So you're not going to see him beat out any hits. He's a
Mhm.
hitter that's up there looking to hit for power. Um, this is a funny comp, but my comp would be like a Mike Ford, right? For the
Mhm.
Mariners last season, where you hit him against righties. He can give you some home runs at times. Um, he's not going to walk a ton. I think the fact that it was 49 walks and hold on here, 126 strikeouts in 391 at bats last season. He's gonna be. He's not going to walk a ton. He's not going to get a lot of hits, but he has power. I have him down at number 8. Um, I think I might even put him lower than that, as I continue to look. But he is a dice roll that is worth taking and can certainly provide power. I just don't see it as of yet. This is very much a scout the stat line sort of player as of right now, I think, for a lot of folks. Um, so I have at number 5 Nolan Shanuel, the first round 2023 first round pick of the Los Angeles Angels. He was picked 11th overall, 6'4", 220 out of Florida Atlantic University, left-handed hitter. And they promoted him to the major leagues, probably trying to satisfy Shohei Ohtani.
Mhm. I would even
Started,
argue they drafted him for that reason. Look who
started
they
his
passed
service
on.
clock like immediately. Like I have no idea what the Angels do or what they're thinking. I thought it was totally freaking crazy that they did that because they didn't have much of a chance. He's an on-base machine. Um, but speaking of Mark Grace, right? I think he's got that kind of Dave Magadan, Hal Morris, these left-handed hitting first basemen who don't really have much power, right? But are going to walk a ton, have a nice hit tool. I think his hit tool is probably a 60, but I think his power could be 50 to 45 to 50, right? He's a light hitting first baseman. Casey Kochman would be another comp, right? Who was an Angel for a long time. He came up and hit 275, 402, 330. So his slug was 330 when he came up with the Angels last season in 29 games. And while I think he's a serviceable, first baseman for a while for the Angels, you're always going to want more, right? You're always going to want more power unless he hits a 50 doubles. So from a fantasy standpoint, is this guy, he's not even Manzardo, right? Manzardo's going to hit 20 home runs. Shanuel might hit 12 to 15. So I have him at 5 because he has a job. He's pretty likely going to start the year at, for the Angels in the major leagues. If not, he's close. And because he has a job and because he did have a 402 on base percentage already in the majors, albeit a small sample, I think there's value there. I also, on that particular team, that team is so bad right now. You could see him hitting higher up in the lineup, right? I think they hit him leadoff, which is insane. But I could see him hitting number 2 and getting on base 38 to 40% of the time. And so there's value with runs. There's value with in an OBP league, there's value there. And in an average league, there's value there. So I don't know. I don't love him. Gun to my head, would I pick Shanuel or Locklear? I'd probably pick Locklear, even though I have Shanuel at 5. But like I said, there is value whether you like that type of profile or not. Do you have him ranked?
I have him at 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything to add? Anything to add with him?
Yeah, I think the Kochman is a good comp here. He's not really that athletic, right? And it's 40 speed. He's kind of like Alex Baum without the EVs, which is pretty bad, right? But bad fantasy wise, right? I don't want to rip on players. He's valuable player for the real life team. But yeah, so yeah, and I think his launch was measured 6.5, right? So that's an issue.
6.5 degrees.
Yeah, so
2.2% barrel rate, 25.6% hard hit, and an average EV in the majors of 85.4 miles an hour.
Yeah,
so you're talking about a light hitting first baseman.
Yeah, at least Baum had the EVs, right? And there was always hope that he was gonna get that launch up.
Right.
So yeah, and then the Angels too, right? If the Dodgers drafted him, well, the Dodgers could do something with him, right? They have a system that could train him, or Tampa, same thing. But what are the Angels going to do with him? I would even argue that the Angels, I said earlier, drafted him because he was ready, right? And they were doing the Ohtani thing and wanted some ready guy to come up, and so they passed on a guy like Emerson or the Philly first round pick.
Or Aiden,
third baseman, Aiden. Yeah.
I forgot his last
name.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they weren't really planning for the future in this pick.
Right. So he was in the majors, he was 33.3% pull, 34.4% center, 32.2% oppo. So Aiden Miller was his name. So I think he has the ability to spray the ball around, right? And like I feel the ghost of Tony Gwynn on my shoulder. Meaning and he's certainly not Tony Gwynn, but the idea that he has bat control and a good eye is a really good place to start. And I want to make sure for myself that I'm not valuing exclusively one type of approach, and that I realize that there's value in a player like that. You just don't necessarily want your first baseman to be that guy, right? But if he has the type of bat control to be able to spray the ball around and keep the defense playing honest, there is value if he can get to 300 or 310, right? And he's got an OBP of 400. I don't care how many home runs you hit, there's value there, especially if he hits higher up in the lineup. So there is some value. I don't love him. And like I said, he has a job, and I think that's a big deal as well.
Mhm.
All right. So he was my 5. Locklear was my 6. Where are we at with you?
You're gonna like my 6,
Okay.
because I had him low last year, but he was still in the top 10, but he's in the center here. I think he's getting people are tiring on him as a prospect, even though he's still young. I think he has the metrics. I think his system is to blame here, but I have Tyler Soderstrom at
Huh,
6.
okay.
Um, obviously there's issues with the off-speed pitches. When he came up, he was, I think, under 100 batting average when he came up. But
Mhm.
again, he was a catcher taken out of high school, probably destined for first base. Um, he is 26 pick overall. He's 6'1", 200. He's still, see, he's 22 years old. He'll be 22 all next year. His birthday's in November, so he's still quite young. Lefty hitter. I still have him at 50-ish hit, 60 power. His walk to K was not very good in the minors, 26, 8% walk. He hits the ball hard though, and he makes contact. The weird thing about him, his in zone contact is 82%, above 80, right? But his chase rate is 33%.
Mhm.
To me, that doesn't say much about. It's not a knock on his talent. It's a knock on what are the A's doing. I think Billy Beane and his team, they're able to identify players, but are the A's investing in training the players, in sharpening their skill sets, right? Because I think this is clear indictment of a talented player they have. Average EV 91, 90 percentile EV 107, max EV 113.
Right.
Look what he has. And yeah, so I'm a little frustrated here because you see the talents, you see under the hood the metrics there, and he's just not there yet.
Right.
But
I think that's an
but don't
indictment of
don't give up on him.
they don't. So I don't have him listed mostly because of the number of at bat. I think he's ineligible as a rookie this season, but
Mhm.
I understand including him here is only 138 plate appearances last season in the majors, but he, I love him. You know that. I think for all the reasons you said, but I think it's a really great point when you think about a prospect, and we talk a lot about what organization they come from. A lot of times it's about, how much investment is there on the part of the organization in the coaching, right? And in the teaching. It's, if you think about the Mariners as an example, and I speak about the Mariners all the time because it's my home team, it's a team I cover, but they're so invested in their minor leagues, right? Both pitching and hitting. And you're seeing the results with pitching, where there are tons of coaches and they're teaching a philosophy, and it's very rooted in something very strong, right? Both offensively and defensively. And with the A's, you almost have this feeling that they're so cash poor, or unwilling to spend is probably a better way to put it, that they quite literally draft these guys, give them a bat and some cleats and a mitt, and just say, go play, right? Without any sort of coaching. And you look at like a Denzel Clark, right? Or a Miles Naylor, like they've got guys, even a Daniel Susak, who's a first round pick as a catcher and played
Mhm.
football and is super athletic. They're
Yeah.
not, they're not coaching anybody. And so I
Warren
think
Butler, that guy's a great athlete, right?
totally, I think that I think you're right. And obviously it's not on Billy Beane because he doesn't have the resources to do anything about it. But yeah, I think you have to tread lightly with Oakland prospects because they don't have the infrastructure to develop in the way that a lot of organizations do. And it puts them behind the 8 ball immediately. Um,
Mhm.
I don't have him ranked. I think he is a 30 home run bat potentially. I also think if he continues to catch a little bit, he's going to be a nice asset at catcher. He did catch 15 games last season. And I think if he's continues to be catcher eligible, whoever has him is going to be in a pretty nice place because he is going to hit for power. So he was your number 6, you said?
Yes.
Who do you have at 7?
Well, again, it's the coupling of these older prospects. So I still have Matt Mervis in my top 10.
Okay.
He's, there's not much to say about him because he was talked about so much last year. I
Right.
think
It was
there's,
like the in-due to talk
yeah,
about last year.
there's prospect fatigue here. I do like the Cubs system. I don't see him other than a platoon first baseman, lefty first baseman, platoon DH. But I still believe there's power there. I think his hit struggled when he got to the majors, but he was kind of up and down. I don't think he was given a consistent shot, just because of who you have there with the Cubs and them contending and so forth. But he still, he has these high EVs when he does make contact. Yeah, I think he could be a solid platoon lefty. Somebody that I would draft late or pick up. Just as kind of that backup to put in versus a righty pitcher that could play first base. But I always thought he was a good player. But what cautioned me last year, I did invest a little bit in rostering him, but I did trade him off because I just didn't see the ceiling there.
Right. I don't have him ranked, I think mostly because I think he does end up being a platoon bat. It doesn't mean there's not value in that kind of platoon bat. Think, Jock Peterson is one that I've rostered a bit where you're looking at a 8, with Peterson, it's a mid 800s OPS and 20 home runs and 350 plate appearances, right? There's value there if you play your cards right. And I think Mervis has that type of potential. When you look at his, like in 22, he was putting up 900 OPS, 900 plus OPS, high A, double A, triple A. There's a bat there, right? There's definitely, even in 99 plate appearances with the Cubs, 91 miles an hour exit or average exit velocity, 111.8 max EV, 13.8% barrel and 50% hard hit, right? And that's small sample. You're talking about 99 plate appearances, but still, that doesn't, the 167 average is not reflective of those batted ball metrics. And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that he does have a nice bat. And there is value if, say, you have Mervis in a corner infield or utility role, and you have another player who you can put there as well. I think Mervis can carry some serious value for your fantasy team. I like it. I don't have him in my top because, again, I see him as a platoon bat, but especially if they don't re-sign Bellinger, you're looking at a player who will have some opportunity. I'm bringing up the Cubs roster resource right now, and they've got,
He's the type of platoon bat too that I don't think mid game would be pinched hit for it either. So if he's going to start for a righty, he's going to play the whole game.
right.
He's that type of platooner.
So at first they have, so roster resource does have him as the number 8 hitter currently. I think he could move up if he hit better. But you're looking at basically Patrick Wisdom as the other guy behind him. And organizationally, they do have Hayden McGarry, who I have off of my top 10, but is a decent prospect. But I think barring a free agent signing, Mervis is looking at 400 plate appearances with the Cubs, which is nothing to sneeze at. So that was your 7, is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Who do you have at 7?
Ryan Clifford.
Okay, I have him at 8.
So Clifford was traded with Drew Gilbert to the Astros in the Justin Verlander trade. Clifford was I think the number 2 prospect in the Astros organization when he was traded. Some people are down on Ryan Clifford a bit. Last season, he did, he struck out 140 times in 423 at bats, but he did hit 24 home runs. Clifford was an 11th round pick of Houston in 2022. He's 6'3", 200 pounds listed. He is listed as a corner outfielder as well. I don't think he has the mobility necessarily to play corner outfield, especially in New York as a Met with the huge outfield that they have. But he's got a lot of power in his bat. And I think there's going to be opportunity in New York for players who are going to be cost controlled given how much they've invested in some of the other positions. And so part of this for me is organization, and part of this is Clifford. I also, Pete Alonso's future in New York is up in the air, and he would be the heir apparent if Alonso goes elsewhere. So I have Clifford at, like I said, at 7. I don't love him as a prospect. I think his power he's probably a 50 hit, 60 power for me. And I think you could push the hit to 55, maybe. But there's not a huge ceiling for him necessarily. Again, he fits in that same slot as Locklear, Shanuel, Manzardo, right? Of guys who, if they hit their ceiling, are serviceable first baseman for a team that's looking to finish 4th, right? Not a championship first baseman in my mind. Do you have Clifford on your top 10?
I have him at 8.
Okay.
So
anything to add as far as your report with Clifford?
Yeah, I have him around the same range, 55 hit, 55 power. Nothing that stands out ceiling wise, but a solid player overall. He does have high EVs. He hits the ball hard, which is good. I think BABIPs were below 300. That may reflect his speed. Obviously, not an outfielder for me. Anything else, with his power, he can hit all fields. His WRC plus was outstanding. Besides one stint, I think that's when he finally
went to the Mets. Yeah.
And but again, that always happens when a player's traded, because moves across the country is in lower minors. But I do like the fact that he's in high ball at age 20, right? So there is a sense of looking at him closely and seeing how he develops there.
So we'll take the next 10 minutes or so to talk about the last couple of guys. I have at 9 Bryce Eldridge, first round pick of the Giants last year. And at 10, Ivan Melendez, first baseman, big thumper for in the Arizona Diamondbacks organization. Do you have either of those two at 9 and 10?
No, they were just on the outskirts here.
Who are your 9 and 10?
Well, Shanuel is my 10.
Oh, that's right.
My 9, I always like to find a speed guy
first.
So
why is that? Why don't you explain why?
So this is stat line scouting, right? And other people have them in the top 10. Again, it's a differential. I want to be able to put somebody in there that's going to make a difference compared to who my opponent has in there that week. Sure. So this may be something that would stand out, just like Ford, but Ford is, I think, elite prospect. Joey Loperfido is not. But he is Houston Astros, 6'3", 220, 7th rounder from Duke, played AAA last year. He is an older prospect, so born in 99, so he's 24 right now, will be 25 next year. 50 hits, 50, 55 power, 55 speed is what I like there. He did have 27 steals last year, only caught 3 times. He seems to be going into Houston's system as kind of a utility player. That's where he'll be. Not sure he'll make the roster this year, but next year with all the changes that are going to happen in Houston, Bregman probably leaving, what's going to happen to Altuve. Abreu signed through 25, but he struggled this year. What's going to happen to him in the future there? So I think he can have the spot at that utility position He hits the ball hard. He doesn't have great EVs, but his hard hit rate was 34. Yeah, so he's just that type of player, keep an eye on to see if you could plug him in with steals. The other thing that with his age, the downside, which may not help with the steals, you want him on base. He did have a 32% K rate once he went to AAA.
Mhm.
But not high ceiling, but kind of the player that you could pick up or grab at the end of a draft if you want a base stealing person that's going to be first base eligible.
Right. And the kind of, in a head to head of stolen bases, you might be on Sunday, you might be able to put him in if you're tied with steals or something like that, and be able to try to steal that category, especially at a position like first. So Eldridge 9, Bryce Eldridge, 16th pick overall in the 23 draft by the Giants. A lot of teams had him scouted as a right-handed pitcher through, I think, upwards of 97 as a pitcher, 96, 97, slider, changeup. Really good prospect as a pitcher, young guy out of high school. But he looks like a first baseman as of right now with the Giants. 6'7", 223 is what he's listed at. Left-handed swing, just light tower power, right? This is like you're talking about your 70, 80 raw sort of dude. Leverages the hell out of the ball and shows some feel for hitting as well, right? I think his hit tool right now is probably a 50, but even if you're talking about, it's like Montes and Isaac, right? If he can go, if he in the major leagues translates to a 50 to 55 hit and a 70 power, like in-game power, that's 35 home runs. So I have him at 9. I think that's mostly because I regard him highly as a prospect. I just think there's a lot of talent, and I can't elevate him any further just because he is so young at this point in time, and it's hard to figure out. He doesn't have the same sample as a Lazaro Montes. Montes has high A and high A in his pocket last season, A ball in his pocket last season, whereas Eldridge is just coming into professional baseball. But great prospect. I like him a lot. Like I said, light tower power. Keep an eye on him. It would not surprise me with the big season in A-ball this season to see him as in a top 3 first base prospects heading into 2025. And then Ivan Melendez, right-handed slugger, played for the Texas Longhorns. I think he led the nation in home runs his senior year. He was a second-round pick, 43rd overall by the Diamondbacks. He's all or nothing, right? Big power. Again, probably 70 raw. There are a lot of people who didn't think he'd be able to hit in professional baseball. Last season, between high A and double A, 272, 345, 578 triple slash with 923 OPS. He hit 30 home runs in 379 at-bats. One bit of caution, 146 strikeouts in 379 at-bats. And he only walked 31 times. So he is, I think, your prototypical lefty masher who is going to be low OBP, high strikeout, could hit 250 with 20 home runs in 300 plate appearances, but still have an OPS of 750, like that kind of guy. There's value there if you can platoon him and you can figure out when he's playing. But as far as fantasy for me goes with Melendez, I'd want him if he's a catcher. Let's put it that way. But I don't want him as a first baseman. That's my top 10. I'll go over mine again. You can go over yours just to recap. I've got Lazaro.
What's up with the Giants in their first round pick? So they had another two-way the year before, right?
Reggie Crawford. Yeah.
Reggie Crawford. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting they're doing that.
So Montes at 1, Mayo at 2, Isaac at 3, Manzardo 4, Shanuel 5, Locklear 6, Clifford, Ortiz, Eldridge, Melendez, honorable mention, Hayden McGarry, Spencer Horowitz, Hunter Goodman of the Rockies, Blaze Jordan, who I don't know how he ends up on these lists still, but he does. And then Troy Johnston's like a numbers scout the stat line with the Marlins. I will say too, there are some arguments to put Samuel Basallo in the first base rankings because he likely will end up there. As we talked about last week, if Basallo was on this list, he'd probably be number one. I could make the argument that Montes is one, but I think Basallo is certainly in that Montes, Mayo, Isaac tier.
Mm-hmm.
You want to recap yours real quick?
Yeah, so on Blaze Jordan, I heard he's lost a significant amount of weight over the winter, but he always shows up.
Right.
So I got Mayo as one. I would, if I were considering Montez, I would put him up there next in 1A, 1B, maybe. Manzardo 2, Locklear 3, Isaac 4, Ortiz 5, Soderstrom 6, Mervis 7, Ryan Clifford 8, Loperfido 9, and Shanuel 10.
Nice. Anything else with first base for you?
Not really. I'm really looking forward to, we're going to get a lot more depth and a lot more elites as we move to second, short, and third. So those are going to be an outfield. So that's going to be fun discussion there with hitters.
As long as tomorrow's first, we're good. It's funny listening to Just Baseball talk. They wax poetic about Amador, and I think Amador is a pretty good prospect, especially with Colorado. But I don't know. It's hard for me when people rank anybody above Termar at second base. So this will be fun. For those listening, you probably already know Termar Johnson is my favorite minor leaguer, hands down. Second baseman picked by the Pittsburgh Pirates a couple of years ago. But I'm looking forward to second base as well. This should be fun. Same time next week.
Yep.
Tuesday morning. Cool. This should be posted by tomorrow, along with our fantasy roundtable that we had on Sunday. I should have the time tonight to get both of those up. But super fun. Thank you, Matt.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye,